This week we're going to talk about serving web pages and configuring a web server. And when it comes to Linux, the Apache web server is not only the most popular, but one of the first and early HTTP servers out there. In order to configure Apache, the Apache web server, again, you have two options. If you're on a GUI environment, um, there is a very nice tool out there to configure Apache, and this tool is called System Config HTTPD. Again, you need to be in run level 5 on a GUI interface, and from there you can basically configure all the different settings for Apache. If you're on a terminal and you want to edit the file directly, you can do that as well. And what you need to do is cd to etc httpd, and then you need to go to the conf directory and edit the httpd.conf file. So let's take a look at that file, httpd.conf. Okay, I'm going to go to the first line, and I'm going to quickly go through this file and show you the important sections of this file. So up to here, everything is commented out, and here it starts with the server root. The server root is basically the top directory tree under which the server's configuration, error, and log files are kept. So in this directory, this is where all the log files and inside which the conf directory exists, and where all the configuration as well as log directories exist. The PID file is the file that basically shows you the current process ID for the Apache web server. Then there's a timeout, which really I'm not too concerned about, but really it's a number of seconds before the server times out. Then different keep alive timeouts. And then these options here are when you are fine-tuning your web server and your load increases and that type of thing. These are the settings here that you need to change in order to tune your server. So how many start servers, the minimum spare servers, max spare servers, server limit, max clients, and max requests per child. These are the different settings that basically here they explain you what each of them means, but when you have a big web server and you have a lot of requests, you might have to increase some of these in order to handle the load. For our class, I'm not really too concerned about them. I just want you to get familiar with Apache this configuration file and basically all the different options. We're not really in the scope of tuning the web server and making it more run faster and that type of thing. Okay, so here it's another important parameter, which basically tells you on what port Apache is going to listen. Not only you can put the port, but you can also put the IP address. So if your machine has multiple IP addresses, you could tell it to just listen on one of those IP addresses and on whatever port. By default, Apache listens on port 80, which is the default HTTP port. One of the nice things about Apache is that it allows you to basically load modules dynamically, and also to add statically compiled modules. So, for example, some of the real popular modules out there are the mod LDAP to allow authentication and to query an LDAP server, mod Perl to do to speed up different Perl scripts, and here basically the list goes on and on about all these modules which developers can create and then just add them here to Apache configuration file. Um, this command here, include conf.d/star.conf. It's a command which basically tells the system to include any files inside the server root, which was etc/httpd slash conf.d. So let's look at so remember the server root was etc/httpd, right? So anything inside there, server root slash let's go back. Anything inside server root slash conf.d slash star.conf, any file with the conf extension in the conf.d directory to be included. So what that allows you to do is to separate the configuration of any particular module with its own file inside this conf.d directory. So if we go to the server root, which is etc/httpd, we should see a conf.d directory. So cd conf.d, and here we can see that, for example, modperl has its own configuration file. The LDAP module has its own configuration file. There's one for SSL, there's one for Python, and etc. So that way you don't have this huge http.conf, but instead each module has its own separate configuration file here under this directory, and basically the main Apache http.conf will include that. Okay, so let's go back to the conf directory and be at the http.conf. Okay, so let's see. Okay, user and group. This is kind of important. This is basically the user and group under which Apache would run. So you don't want to really run Apache as the root directory, because if it gets compromised, you don't want your user to be root on your system. So you run it as a regular account, and in this case is user Apache and group Apache. This is important in cases when you need to write to a directory, as let's say you have a modperl script that needs to write to a directory for some little program that you have running through CGI or modperl. So if you have that, make sure that the directory has write access by this user and group. Otherwise, the program will fail. The server admin is basically the email in which error pages will point the user to if needed. The server name basically gives the name and the port that the server uses to identify itself. So in this case, it's the host name : and then 80, which is the default HTTP port. Okay, this one right here is very important. Document root. And as it says there, is the directory out of which you will serve your documents. So for this default configuration, if you go to http://tlos1.csc57e.edu, basically the web server will go to this directory and serve any pages inside this directory. So if there is an index.html in this directory, then in order to call that page, it would be http://tlos1.csc57e.edu/index.html, and then you can have, of course, subdirectories inside there. Okay. So then inside your document root, you can have these um, basically these directories, and you can configure each of these directories separately. So here for the root directory, which is slash inside here, so for bar www.html, which is the slash directory, we are setting some restrictive set of features. So we're saying to follow links. So if in that directory you have links to other directories, to go ahead and follow those. And then to allow override none, what this means is that if you have allow override, then that means that if you can create a file in that directory called .hta access, in which you can pass options, and Apache will read that file. But if you have allow override none, even if you have a file, Apache won't look at that file. It will just go with what is in this file here, the main configuration file. It won't, and that won't be overwritten by any .hta access file on that directory. This again is the configuration for the bar www.html, and here we have options, and we're doing indexes, and we're doing follow symlinks. Indexes means that if you have not defined an index page for that directory, or if you have defined an index page but that page with that name is not found, the server will list you all the files located in that directory. So it indexes all the files available if no index page is found on the directory. And again, follow symlinks allows the web server to follow any links in there. Allow override none again means that if there is a .hta access in that directory with different settings, that we're not going to even read that or overwrite what this file has. Now, this basically allows you to control who can get stuff from the server. So this is saying that when we process these rules, to first do the allow ones and then do the deny ones. In this case, we don't have any deny ones, we just have allow. So we're allowing from all. We could have deny from all, or we can allow from only a certain IP address or network and that type of thing. But here we don't have any restrictions. We're allowing everybody to be able to get to the server and this directory, to be more specifically. Okay, so just like we can do things by directories and do configuration based on the directories inside our document root, we could also do this by modules. So if this module is present, then we can do certain things. So this module here is the mod user dir.c. It's a very important module, and what this module does is it basically enables requests to requests to tilde and user, which user could be any account that is found on the server, and this includes NIS accounts. So we have an NIS student account, right? So in our case, if you went to http://tlos1.tsc570e.edu/tilde NIS student, if you went to that directory, and under the directory, under the home directory for NIS student, if there was a public HTML folder, the server will go in there and read any pages that you have available there. So by default it's enabled. So well, by default it's disabled, so I comment this out to enable it, and I told it that to look for a public HTML directory under each home directory of every user, and if there is a public HTML, to serve pages from there. So this is important when you're doing when you're allowing serving of web pages for multiple users on your system, because then all you need to do is tell your users to create a public underscore HTML directory into their home directories, and then any pages inside the public HTML would then be displayed by going to the server slash tilde and then the username. Okay, and then what we've done here is um, we have a configuration for that directory. So anything in slash home star, so any user, public HTML, we've told it allow override all. So what this means is this gives each user the ability to control their own public HTML directory and do whatever they want. By creating a .hta access file, they can put different options that they want. So they could create a .hta access file and put basically all of this stuff if they wanted to, and put options to follow symlinks, to index things, and basically anything that you have here on this http.conf can be put on the .hta access and configure it there, and whatever you have on the .hta access will override what's on this file. So this allows the user basically to configure their directories. But the only issue with this is that it requires a little bit more resources, because now Apache has to parse that directory and look for that file every time you serve a page from there. Okay. The directory index is an important setting, and what this says is that when you go to a directory, and if you don't specify the file that you're serving from that particular directory, to look for this file and displays this file as the default, and you could have multiple, so it will go in this order. So if you go to the root of tlos1.csc578.edu, it will first look for an index.html in that directory. If it's not found, then it will look for an index.html.bar. If it doesn't find it, I could add another one, index.php. And if it doesn't find it, it could look for another one, index.shtml, which is a server-side include file. And if it doesn't find any of those, then it will check and see if that directory has indexes, the option of indexes available. If it does, then it will list every file available on that system, on that directory. If it doesn't have indexes, then it will give you an error page that page that doesn't exist. Okay, and here for the allow overrides, here's the name of the file that I mentioned before, the .hta access, which is the name of the file to look in each directory for overriding configuration directives. Okay, and this is just a security feature to basically not allow people to download the .hta access file and see what configurations you have in that directory. Okay, so let's keep going and let's see. I'm just skipping some of these because they're not really very important. I'm trying to give you an idea of the important stuff. Okay, here's the logs. So again, you're gonna go to the server root and you're gonna have a logs directory there, and any errors are gonna be they're basically going to be written to the error log. And here you define the type of log level that you want. So how much do you want to log in? The most you can do is if you want error, if you're testing your server and you want to get all the different real detailed information about the errors, you can do debug, which is what I have. If you're on a production type server in which you're very confident of your server and all the scripts that you're running, then you could do emergency where you log very little. The more logging, the more resources you're consuming. Here is basically the format and the type of format that you want. So what kind of information you want to log in your in your not your error log, but your custom log. So every time a user hits a page, what type of information do you want to store about that request? And you can specify that here. And here you're telling it the type of um, the directives that you want for your custom log and how much you want and that kind of thing. And what format too. Okay. Server signature. This is a very important parameter here, which most people don't know about, but there are actually two: server signature, and then the other one is called server tokens. Server tokens. Okay. These two parameters basically give out a lot of information about your server to the user. So every time you encounter an error page, or there's an error with a request or a response, your system gives out this information about your server. And you need to be careful how much information you want to give the user about your server. Um, in my opinion, you don't want to give any information on a production server, because then people can tailor their attacks based on what kind of software you're running. So I'm going to give you an example. Um, if I go here and I look at my root directory, I have a file called tokens.txt, okay? So for server tokens, if you set it to production, basically when you get this error, your server just says that it's a Apache server. That's the least amount of information you can give. Now if you send it to full, then you tell the user that you're running Apache version 2.041 on the Unix environment, and it tells them all the different modules that you have configured. So what this does is it allows the hacker to see all this information and on the different packets, and it's way too much information, which then a person can use to maliciously attack your server. So be careful to minimize these settings, both the server tokens and the server signature. For server signature, I would recommend doing off, and for server tokens, do production so that you don't give us much information. Okay. So we'll go back here to server signature. Okay. An alias is basically it allows you to reference a directory on based on your document root. So here we're saying anything that goes to document root /icons to look in this directory for it, which is a little bit different directory than the server root, which would have been well, let's say the document root is bar www.html. Normally icons would have existed inside bar www.html/icons, but here we've created an alias which says anything in site/icons to be served from this directory instead, which could be different than your document root. And here we have directory settings for that. Another module. Let's keep going. This stuff is not really very important, so I'm just kind of skipping it. I think the next thing that I want to show you is virtual hosting. And let me just see. What virtual hosting allows you to do is, let's say you have a server, and from that server you want to serve multiple websites, but your server just has one IP address. So what you can do is, in DNS you could create different aliases for your server that point to the same IP address of your server, and then Apache can serve a website for each and every one of those aliases in DNS that is totally different from the other websites. So it allows you to host multiple websites based on their name. Or if you have a server with multiple IP addresses, you could also serve multiple different web pages, each with their own IP address. So in this case, I've configured a name virtual host. So what I've done is, my main configuration server name was tlos1.csc570e.edu, but here I've added a virtual host for tlos1-v, which is my ETH0:0 interface, and but this could have easily been just another name in DNS that points to the same IP of my ETH0 interface. So in this case, tlos1-v.csc570e points to this IP address, and I'm telling it to create a virtual host on this IP address on this port. So any hits that come to this web server using this name in the header of the request to redirect to this server path and to this document root. So my default document root for tlos1.csc570e.edu was var www.html. Well, if the request comes to tlos1-v.csc570e.edu, then to look for pages in this directory. And again, inside your virtual host, you can basically put any configuration parameter found in this file. What I've done here is I've created separate error and custom logs. I have to define a different server admin, so email messages go to a different email account or display when there's errors. And I've set a different directory index, so I'm saying that for tlos1-v request, that my index pages are going to be index.html, index.htm, index.php, and index.shtml. And here for the var www.html v directory, which is the document root for this virtual host, I want allow override all. So if there is a .hda access, to read it and overwrite what's in here. And then I'm also allowing server side includes for that virtual host. And then to when you look at rules, to allow first and deny second, and I'm allowing from all, so really there's no deny, so it allows everybody to access the pages. Now let's take a look at this options include. So I'm allowing for this virtual host under this directory options include. So if the user wants to write a server-side include, they can, and all they have to do is, let me look for that as HTML. Okay, here I've added this handler called add type, and for pages that are text HTML, that's shtml. And what this says is that any page with this extension, that shtml, to parse for server-side includes. So if the directory has the options includes, then to look any files with the extension .shtml, I'm telling the web server to parse and execute those server-side includes. So when the user hits http://tlos1-v.csc570e.edu/ and they put let's say they put index.shtml, and there is an index.shtml in that directory. Since includes are activated, then the server will parse any server-side includes in there and execute those instead of just reading a regular web page. So again, this requires a little bit more resources, but it allows you to do some dynamic pages, and you can read more about the things you can do with server-side includes by doing a search on Google. Let me see, I'm trying to think. I think that's basically it for Apache. Again, virtual hosting is very important because most people, when they run Apache, they want to run more than just one website. And again, what you can do is all you have to do is create an alias in DNS for your IP address and add a new DNS record that points to the same IP address. And then here, all you have to do is just create a virtual host for that name, that DNS name, and just give it a different directory from where to save pages from. Also, you could do it by IP, and if you have a machine with multiple IPs, then you could serve different web pages for each of the IPs based on the host names, which is sort of what I've done here. This is the IP address of my ETH0:0 interface, and I'm running a website off of just that IP. So let me just quickly show you that. If I go elinks, this is a text-based browser, http://tlos1.csc570e.edu. If I go to that directory, then I'm loading an index.php file that virtually that dynamically tells me the host name of that request, which is tlos1.csc570e.edu. Okay, now if I go to instead, if I go to tlos1-v, then the index page in there is actually an index.shtml file, and this will tell me that the host name for that virtual site is tlos1-v. That's csc570e.edu on port 80, and the request came from this client, and this is the type of browser that it's using. Okay, so that's the difference there. I'm running two separate websites served from two different directories and for two different host names. So that's basically it for this week.